forward, follow me. If I hesitate, push me. If I may kill me, avenge me. If I am a traitor, kill me.
Gangsters, cops, and politicians, get ready to rock. We're on a mission. Each one of us shares our own vision. When I was on the yard, I went real hard. While I patrolled the streets, all the G's on me. When I was on the yard, I went real hard. While I patrolled the streets, all the G's on me.
Saludos, it's your host, Gabe Morales. We are winding down towards the end of our roll call list of Nuestra Familia members over the past 6 decades or so. Today, I'll start off with a few names under the U last names. First, I have Alfonso Güero Urango, who was out of Stockton. Understand he was a drug dealer and worked with the Nuestra Familia in the mid-1980s. He was popped onto firearms in 1989, whereby I believe he was given a D number. I then show that he paroled in 1990. Understand he was an NF associate in the 1990s and was involved in a homicide for the NF and was given E numbers in Edward 7729. Understand that he possessed some guns that belonged to NF and did not return them. And for that, there was an attempted 187 on him, as well as his older brother, Manny Orongo. I think there may have been a Manuel Jr. Orongo, also out of Stockton, that did time in CDC. Let me know if you have more information about the Orongo family out of Stockton. Moving on to the V last names. There was Edward, a.k.a. Fast Eddie Valdez, who I understand was a boxer out of Compton. He was affiliated with the NF in the early 1970s under B number 14835, being that he was from Compton in Southern California, and probably via his interest in boxing, I understand he had decent communications with the Mexican Mafia. This was a time period after the Shoe War when there was an uneasy truce between the Mexican Mafia and the Nuestra Familia. And Fast Eddie wrote a letter to Cheyenne on the anniversary of the Shoe War, September 16th, 1972. However, these peace efforts did not work out, and as most of you know, Cheyenne Cadena was killed on December 17th, 1972 at Palm Hall by the NF. There was a Gavino Porky Valdez out of Salinas. Understand that he had Nuestra Familia tattooed on his hands. However, had some issues with the NF, and he was killed by them on October 29, 1976, at the Monterey County Jail. There was John, a.k.a. Little John Valdez, out of an East LA gang called Little Valley. He was involved in the NF at the very beginning under A number 70360 and was very close to NF co-founder Chalo Hernandez. Understand that when they wrote the Constitution, Chalo very easily could have been set up to be the padre of this new prison gang called Nuestra Familia Mexicana. However, Little John had a parole date, so it was decided that he would become the padre as Chalo wanted to spread their organization out to the streets, which was, contrary to what some people say, had some revolutionary cultural awareness aspects to it, as seen here in their Constitution. Understand that after Little John paroled, he decided he did not want to follow through on their plans and dropped out of the organization. At that point, Chalo again became the number one, but once again relinquished authority to Juan Lips Valdez out of Basa Grande in the San Gabriel Valley. I gotta admit, when I first heard some of the old prison gang investigators talking about Juan Valdez and John Valdez, I thought they were the same individual. Once I seen mugshots of these two guys and checked out their different CDC numbers, I realized they were two entirely different people, but both were called El Padre, the number one spot in the Nuestra Familia Mexicana. I showed that Lips first had a CDC number of B, 3706. So he would have had one of the earliest B numbers. I understand since Chalo didn't want to be accused of fixing the hierarchy in the NFM, that Lips was sponsored by original member Freddie Gonzalez. Chalo also wanted to set up recreational programs and gyms in order to recruit from the next generation of young Chicanos. And the fact that Lips' brother, Philip, was a well-known community organizer, fit very well into Chalo's vision of what the NFM should look like out on the streets. Lips ended up being involved in the infamous shoe war, September 1968, and was hit by Ponce Amato of the Mexican Mafia. Lips is seen here in this very historical picture of NFM members in the San Quentin parole room. I was told by Tony Casas around early 1969 when they're being interviewed by Sergeant Bill Hankins, who was trying to squash all the animosity between the Mexican Mafia and the Familia. But other people say that it was taken in 1970. Regardless, it is one of the earliest large group pictures known of the prison gang. Lips remained the Padre from 69 till the summer of 1972, when he was hit on July 11th at CIM in Chino by Mexican Mafia members Ronnie Salazar and Victor B. Vamesa. My understanding is he was hit approximately 50 times. I understand that this hit was called by Joe Morgan, who had no interest in seeing peace between Mexican Mafia. Understand that Lips paroled shortly after that, but had a parole violation, I believe, in 1973. During that time period, I understand that when he was out in the streets of Balsas Grande, per CDC prison gang expert Brian Perry, he actually had guards posted outside of his house and along the street, as he was extremely worried that the inmate would finish him off. Understand that eventually Lips debriefed to the prison gang task force and moved away from the area. There was Ishmael Valdivia out of Watson. Understand that he was a Nuestra Familia associate with CDC number F as in Frank, 46562. However, he was only validated as being an En Soldado associate in 2009 by CDC. Understand that he was recognized as being a unit commander at Corcoran Shoe in 2012 and was moved to San Quentin in 2016. However, I show is currently not in custody. There was a Jesse, aka Black Jess Valenzuela, out of Chiques, who was another individual who was a very early Nuestra Familia Mexicana member when he had B number 6330. If you remember, I previously stated that Juan Valdez had B number 3706. So both these guys had some of the first B numbers to come out. Understand that Black Jess was sponsored by Chalo Hernandez and was recognized as being given one of the top 5 spots in the organization. It is my understanding, actually, that Black Jess was an informant. In particular, would often talk to prison gang investigator Sergeant Bill Hankins about activity that the Mexican Mafia was doing out on the yards of San Quentin. Understand that Black Jess also attempted to make peace with the M, whereas individuals like Babo Sosa wanted no such thing and were fed up with the M attacking their people. Understand that when Babo Sosa took over, Black Jess distanced himself from the organization and was recognized as being a hermit by 1974. Time finally caught up to Black Jess when on June 19, 1975, he was killed at CIM by Joker Mendoza and Babo Sosa's brother, Buggy. Understand this occurred right after he had a parole board hearing. There's a guy who, I don't recall his first name, but I remember they called him Ghetto Boy, Valenzuela out of Stockton. He had E numbers as in Edward, 51185. And the reason why I recall this guy very clearly is he was definitely a youngster. And when I escorted Joe Morgan into the violence control unit shortly after this picture was taken, and I recall Joe being housed right next to him. As we walked up, Ghetto Boy laughed and said, "Who is this bald-headed old fart?" After I put Joe away, I told him, "Hey, you should be a little more careful about who you disrespect." And he started to say, "I don't give a F who he is." And I cut him off short and said, "Okay, I just thought you should know when you disrespect Joe Morgan, that might not be a good move." And I saw like a deer in the headlights look in his face, because it was well known that Joe Morgan had a lot of people killed and a lot of people killed for him for disrespecting him. When I came back up later to check on Joe, I overheard Ghetto Boy tell him, "Hey, if you need anything, just let me know, man." He totally changed his tune, which is probably good for him. I never heard of Ghetto Boy after that, but if you know a Ghetto Boy Valenzuela out of Stockton, I'd be interested to know There's Armando Bandit Bahia. Understand he was close to Charlie Brown Acala in the Nuestra Raza, but also was active with the Salinas Regiment in the 1990s when he had K number 7534. I believe he was processed at San Quentin, but moved to Corcoran in 2002. I show he paroled, but was arrested in August of 2010 when he was arrested by the feds for conspiracy to distribute methamphetamine. And I show that he was just recently released in mid-February 2024. There was a David Neto Varela, who was out of Fort Maravilla, the same gang that Joe Morgan was from. Once again, back in those days, there were a lot of guys from Southern California that joined the NF, especially individuals that were tired of the MA preying on fellow Chicanos. And many of those individuals came from the Maravilla gang. Understand he joined when he had A number 37776. Shortly after the organization started. However, I showed that he became a hermit by 1976. Understand then he was reincarcerated in the 1980s under D number 87886. Then show that he was only validated as being an NF in the year 2000. And I showed that he was off that D number by at least the year 2004. There was Joe Leakebird Varela Hernandez. He was an NF member in the early 1970s with B number 25126. Understand that he was actually housed at CIM, I believe in cell 298, when the NF killed Cheyenne Cadena. And I believe he retired sometime around 1990, having been considered retired in good standings for putting in over 20 years work with the Familia. There was Danny Vargas at the San Diego Regiment, which will be covered at the end of this series. I show he was an NF member in the mid-1970s with B numbers in Bravo 47306, but had paroled by March 1976. There was an Eddie, a.k.a. Flaco, a.k.a. Pájaro, Vargas Martinez. I showed that he was incarcerated in the California Youth Authority at Perkins in 1980. He was popped in 1982 for robberies and given C numbers in Charles 63007. Understand he paroled in 1984 and continued putting in work with 211s being his specialty. I then show he was returned to CDC in 1985 and was housed at Old Folsom Prison in 1986. I show he was at Tehachapi in 1988 and was released sometime after that. I then show that when he was out in the streets in the early 90s, he was involved in multiple robberies and 187s. And he was charged on the 1992 RICO case under K number 63463. Understand that he also was charged by the feds for bank robberies during that time period, and I believe was housed by the feds in Arizona in 1997. However, he then was returned to CDC and housed in Mule Creek State Prison in 2002. He then was moved to Richard J. Donovan in 2012, and I show is currently housed at CTF Soledad, being 60 years of age. Next, I'm going to talk about some of the individuals with the last name of Vasquez. I'll first address two individuals out of Stockton. The first one being Manuel Lito Vasquez, who I understand was with Stockton's Little Unity Gang, which, as I have stated previously, was known as being in the Porsche group for the Nuestra Familia, when he had C numbers in Charles 11514. Understand that he remained with the NF until the early 1990s and later was housed at CATF Corcoran from approximately 2004 to 2012, but I show is currently not in custody. Then we have Nico Vasquez. I'm not sure if he was related to Lito, but he was also out of Stockton. I understand that he was known as being an Insoldado in the late 1990s under P numbers in Paul 36581. I then showed that he was elevated to be an NF status at Pelican Bay SHU by at least the year 2012. He was housed at Corcoran SHU in 2015, and when they started letting all the guys out of the SHU, he was eventually released to Salinas Valley State Prison in 2016. But I show has been housed at Solano State Prison for at least the past couple of years. Now I'll talk about a different Vasquez family. This one is a very large family out of Gilroy. In fact, I understand it consisted of multiple brothers who originally came up from Texas as farm workers, which is very common. That's the same thing that happened with my family. However, most of us stayed in Washington State, but we also had some that went down to California. I'll go by alphabetical order and cover some of the ones that I know of. And like I said, I believe they're all related. There was a Daniel Vasquez I believe was the brother of Robert Black Bob Vasquez. I believe that Daniel was born in 1948. I understand he had a B number in the mid 1970s and was involved in attempted murder of Pablo Pantera Pena in 1976. I shall show that there was a Demetrius, aka Sonny Vasquez. There is also Diana Vasquez, who I understand NF shot caller Skip Villanueva was the boyfriend at one time of. When it comes to the Vasquez family, it can be very complicated to understand because many members of that family, not all who were involved in criminal activities. But I know that Diana communicated with Skip, Corny Tristan, and Quete via phone, letters, and understand she even operated a post office box for the NF out of Morgan Hill. She ended up being indicted under Operation Black Widow and arrested with multiple NF members and associates. She ended up fighting her case for many years in San Francisco federal court, but finally pled guilty to some of the charges and served all her time at the female facility in Dublin, located in the East Bay area. I have been told that she is very proud of her family and her roots to Gilroy. And while she is no longer actively involved with the NF, she still supports La Causa. There was Eddie Vasquez, a.k.a. Cookie. Understand that he was an NF associate in the 1970s, and I was told was made NF by the 1980s with a C number. However, some individuals dispute that and said that he was only related to the NF via other family members. There was a Jason Vasquez. I'm not sure if he was related to the other ones, but he is mentioned in that case that I talked about in the last episode involving Lucky Shelton and the attempted 187 Robert Fat Cow Jasso, a bouncer who apparently disrespected Lucky when he talked about some of the killings committed or ordered by Lucky. There was a Joseph Weasel Vasquez. He's from Gilroy and had E numbers in Edward 79172. I showed that he was Nuestra Raza in the 1990s and was housed at Wasco State Prison in 1999. However, apparently became a dropout by 2002 at North Kern State Prison. There was Peter Sniper Vasquez, who was the son of Black Bob. My understanding is that he was a hardcore Nuestra Raza member in the 1990s under J number 53020. I believe he was housed in the SHU for many years and may have acquired SHU syndrome. I believe he was housed at Soledad in the year 2000, but had paroled by 2002. Upon his parole, he ended up moving to Idaho, where he started a nonprofit program called Second Chance Grace, where he tries to help gang members turn their lives around. He also goes inside of prisons and talks to prisoners and tries to work with them and also works with them on the outs regarding such things as tattoo removal programs. There was a Ralph Chato Vasquez, who I understand was also a brother of Black Bob. I've been told that he was involved in the 187 of Jerry Blanco in Stockton in 1976 and was given B numbers in Bravo 83212. Understand that he had dropped out by at least the mid-1980s, around the same time that his brother distanced himself from the organization. And I believe that Ralph died in July of 2014. And lastly, we have Robert, a.k.a. Black Bob, a.k.a. Coach Vasquez. Understand that he was first busted as a juvenile in Gilroy in 1959. His dad, Dionyso Vasquez, a.k.a. Chino, was very close to Cesar Chavez. However, Chino was never an NF member, nor did he ever support the NF. In fact, he was very upset at the actions of his son. Dionyso, aka Chino Vasquez, to this very day is looked as being a hero to the people of Gilroy and was also involved in bringing in affordable housing to farm worker families in the area. And in fact, today there stands a very nice apartment complex that's named in his honor, located in Gilroy. Robert, aka Black Bob, aka Coach Vasquez, who was a very early NF member. However, he was not an original. When he had A numbers in Alpha 86343, Black Bob was known as introducing heroin into facilities, often after visits from his family, per his own self-admission. Understand that he was made NF around 1967, which would have been a couple of years after they started. Thus, he would not know all the details of the organization when Chalo Hernandez, Little John, and Freddie Gonzalez set it up. According to his own words, he was introduced to the Canales at Soledad around 1967. By 1973, he was made a captain in the NF when it reorganized under Bob Sosa. As seen in multiple pictures, Black Bob was well respected and is even seen in a picture here with Death Row Joe Gonzalez after he hit general population. and that he returned to custody in May of 1976 with B number 73448. I show that he was at DVI in 1977 when the rest of the Carnales were there. However, there was growing internal dissension among NF members as Babo Sosa and Death Row Joe had many members killed, some who were still regarded as being good Carnales. Thus, along with individuals like Brown Bob Vitamontes, he engaged in a campaign to remove Babo and Death Row Joe. This was a major move in the history of the NF, basically cutting the organization in half. And many individuals ended up leaving the organization during this time period, which was also the same time that CDC had allegedly perfected its validation system and were locking down guys in adjustment centers, many of which were the predecessors of the security housing units, or SHUs. He ended up paroling in 1984 from Old Folsom 4A to Arizona, where I believe he lived until 1989. He then ended up returning to the Gilroy area, where some state he still was acting as undercover NF. However, other individuals state this was not the case and that he actually was giving information to law enforcement. Understand that in later years, he worked as a custodian and, as far as I know, is still alive. Así es la vida. I had a cousin whose favorite saying was YOLO, which stood for you only live once. And indeed, this is true. So make sure that you use those years wisely. With that, this is Gabe Morales signing off for gangsters, cops, and politicians. If I go forward, follow me. If I hesitate, push me. If they, I may kill me, avenge me. If I am a traitor, kill me.
Gangsters, cops, and politicians, get ready to rock. On a mission, each one of us shares our own vision.